Before we go into what our playbook looks like, we always want to come back to first principles as entrepreneurs in our wealth development goals, right? The first and foremost is cash is always king. And sometimes we forget that, but we only remember that cash is king when it's the 25th of the month. Raise hands. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. I see, I see you right there, right? Sometimes we're from the 1st to the 24th, we're trying to meet this goal and trying to meet that goal. And then you might get a call from a coworker that, I have something to do at the bank, just asking if you can give me an advance, and then I check the account. Oh, I don't have any money. As entrepreneurs, we sometimes take a back burner in the finance side of the business because we think it's boring. We don't think it's relevant. I've heard that before. We don't think it's needed right now. We just need to focus on growing the business, growing the business. But growing the business takes cash. And if you don't have that, it makes sense to just do a 9 to 5. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth, right? The next one is margins are much more important than revenue. How many of us have product type businesses? How many of us knows what our margins are? You know what your break even is, you know what your gross margin is, you know what your net margin is. I think a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, they focus a lot on, I need to grow revenue by X%. I need to ensure that we hit this revenue target. But then when you ask them, what are your costs? You're having revenues of, let's say, 5 million, but your costs are 6 million. Why? There's a rule of thumb that we have where for example, your payroll expenses should not pass more than 25 to 30% of your revenues. Some companies' payroll expenses are 60% of their revenues, but yet your staff are not generating the revenues that should. You should always understand what your margins are, but also understand what your margins are per industry. No one entity is the same. The next one is recurring revenue is strategic leverage. Sometimes we understand where we have service companies where we have to earn based on clients that we get, which may not necessarily be recurring, right? Ooh. But what I've learned is, and it's been mentioned a few times yesterday and today, learn how to package your services and sell them on a recurring basis. One of the things that I did, because I had assurance, as I know, which includes audit, financial reviews, etc., but also advisory. And within advisory department, we have a rule of thumb that every advisory engagement is one-off and done. You finish an engagement today, it's not recurring. You can't get it back. So from my perspective, I ask myself the question, how can I package my advisor services to ensure that I have continuous clients? Born the fractional CFO service. What the fractional CFO service does is it offers my services at a set hours per month to multiple clients. And that recurs on a month-by-month basis. So you have maybe 2-3 year contracts with clients where I act as your consultant CFO, assisting with driving the growth of your company. What that does, it ensures that while I will have our other advisory engagements and audit engagements, I know there's consistency in revenue, at least to cover our costs. Mitigating any form of cash flow risk, but also ensure I have strategic leverage if I need to negotiate down the road with financial advisors or whatever it is. The last one is, should you be asset light versus asset heavy? And that ultimately depends on the type of entity that you are and what return you can get from those assets. Sometimes we find service entities spending so much on unnecessary assets, especially earlier on when it's not necessary. You don't need an office if you depend on the type of service, of course, but if you can remain hybrid or stay at home and come do the service, why do you need to spend money for rent, spend money for furniture? Because when you do rent an office, you have to build out that office, which is in Jamaica, on average, $2.5 to $3 million, depending on the size of the office. There's so much you can save if you make strategic decisions based on the type of service that you do provide. Especially if you are an asset-rich entity, should you buy versus lease? Right? Sometimes those are what we call the first principles in terms of entrepreneurial wealth creation.